You know, it kind of is funny that they wouldn't have had to wait that many more years for it to have been released legitimately 28 years later from the original, but guess they just didn't have the patience. 28 years later, the first one, I haven't seen The Bone Temple, but I saw this on the plane headed out to Los Angeles when I went to Gallifrey 1. And I really wasn't sure what to expect. I'd heard pretty mixed things about this one. And I will say that overall, and definitely in terms of some of the broad stroke decisions that are made, it's pretty good. There's two things that bring it down for me, and unfortunately bring it down a fair bit. One of which doesn't matter as much, but just bugs me. And then another that I'm like, oh, really? So let's start positive. This is Danny Boyle, back in the director's chair, who hasn't directed since 28 Days Later. And like, I will give this credit right now. This is better than 28 Weeks Later. I feel like 28 Weeks Later has gotten an unjustly positive reevaluation in recent years because of how strongly it opens, or at least that's what it feels like. But I maintain that 28 Weeks Later falls apart almost as soon as they kill Robert Carlyle's character. Like that was an inexplicable creative decision as far as I'm concerned. So I don't especially like 28 Weeks Later. Again, it opens incredibly strongly, but I don't think that one's very good. 28 Days Later, I do like, and I've always liked. So, and having Danny Boyle back obviously means it's going to be shot well and presented well because it's Danny Boyle. I did worry at the very beginning because the opening I didn't especially like, except that it mostly doesn't matter until, the end, but we'll get to that. And so I was nervous, but what I really like about it, like the overriding decision that I really enjoyed, is that they scaled the story back down again. Because not that it's the main failing of 28 Weeks Later, but one of the failings of 28 Weeks Later is attempting to go larger scale with the entire thing. Just scale the threat up. Oh, it's the sequel. It's got to be bigger. And I really was worried that they were going to do the same thing with this. Oh, it's even later. We got to scale it up even more. And they don't. It's a small story about a core small group of characters, like 28 Days Later was. And it doesn't feel like it's about, these larger implications, and it's not about these bigger action set pieces. It's about this family on this island that, is cut off from the mainland, but is still close enough to the mainland to be part of the quarantine zone where they're not ever allowed to leave. But they've etched out their own way of being and living. Come up with ways to get by on the few resources that they have. Occasionally, people will go out to the mainland for some additional resources, but they try their best to sustain with what they have. And narrowing it down to this core family of a father, a mother, and a son, as the son is sort of coming to that age of needing to be a man, which is kind of ritualized. Here in a way that I think makes sense, and having the struggles feel as real as they do, having the characters be as believably flawed as they are, but in a way that does not pass, I think, undue amounts of judgment. I'm not going to say it doesn't judge any of the characters. It does, but I don't think it like ratchets up the level of judgment on characters like for the sake of drama or anything like that, which I think would have been very easy to do, and I think a lesser version of this story would have done. And so keeping it really more narrowly defined to the smaller cast that it has, I think works really, really well for this. And that's ultimately what I like. And that, since that is the overall feel of the film as a whole, I am able to say that overall, I liked it. But, so my complaints venture a little bit into spoiler territory. Well, one, a little, the other, arguably a lot, except I would say not really, but I'll be able to explain that when we get there. But to deal with my somewhat less spoilery issue, I don't like how the infected are handled. I they basically made some very deliberate choices to completely change how this thing operates. And the way that it impacts the infected, the way they behave, I'm not going to say it fully abandons the whole rage thing that it had going before, but it brings in so much other stuff. It just feels like a completely different approach. It is strange to me that ostensibly this is the same virus that that happened in 28 Days Later. And in terms of the specifics, like I don't have a problem with the broad notion of like zombie types of like certain infecteds that that have maybe, depending on how long the body's been dead, or other stuff, like you get certain types. I think honestly something like The Last of Us kind of embodies that most with the degree of the cordyceps infection. You get your basic infected, you get your clickers, and stuff like that. But here, like the first one we see, what do they call them? Slow lows or something like that. It's just these, and they all look the same. These bald, bloated, crawling things, and they look so uniform. It feels like a copied enemy type in a video game, so I already don't like that. Like there's a little bit more variety in the fast ones, but like the fact that the first ones we see are just uniformly bloated and hairless, moving in the exact same manner. I'm like, what are we doing here? And that's even before we get to the alphas, which I hate for a litany of reasons. So I am at this point, like, I'm not even going to get hung up on the whole, alphas, alpha wolves, and most of that notion is scientifically bunk. Like, it's nonsense, as the very guy who came up with the idea in the first place has been pleading people to realize for frickin' decades. But I'll set that aside, even without, because they're allowed to pretend that alphas are a real thing, but it's so freaking boring. It's just like, oh, and there's like these ones who are smarter and stronger, and they control the others, and like, yeah, okay, so you're gonna call them alphas, and they are, of course, really big, muscular guys with notably large, visible genitalia. What the hell, man? Like, what did you think you were doing with that? Because it's one thing to use the notion of alphas as a plot point in anything for me at this point, and it's something I'm generally not going to like. But I really don't like it when you decide to just lean into the most toxic interpretation of what that idea even is, which is, oh, big, strong, muscular, hung, alpha. That's the embodiment of strength, of superiority to you, is this nonsense. I think it's very telling that despite the fact that I'm pretty sure, no, we definitely see multiple alphas, and they're all big, burly, bearded guys. Like the explanation that is given is that it just impacts a certain percentage of people like they're on steroids. I'm like, okay, why are they all guys? Nothing in the description says that they have to be male, but like, oh, but we're calling them alphas, so they're all going to be dudes. Like, piss off, man. Like, it's toxic in an uninteresting way. Like, you're just, and I'm not saying that like things can't contain innately toxic ideas, but generally, for me, if you're going to, some acknowledgement and or exploration of that would be nice, and there isn't any here. It's just a thing. It's just a thing that they did, and again, just feels like it's ported in from a completely different take on this kind of zombie infection than 28 Days Later. So I don't like any of that. I don't like the idea, and I don't like the execution of the idea either, because sometimes an idea that I don't like can still be done well. I would argue it's not here. It's done in the least interesting way possible. So I don't like the idea, and I don't think they did it well. The other thing that I don't like about this is the very ending. And like I said, this is technically spoilery. I would say it's not even because it's so freaking detached from the rest of the movie. Except for literally the first scene, which I also didn't like. So after the conclusion of this story and this, wrap up with this family and this kid. And I didn't even mention Ray Fiennes' character, who's fascinating and wonderfully performed. And there's actually something really moving about the kid, placing his mother's skull on top of that temple. Like it's touching and it's really well done. And it feels like we wrap up this wonderful emotional story. And then we just have these guys with gold chains doing flip parkour and like what the hell was that? Like, I know what it was. It was the setup for the sequel, which I've heard is better, which is, I believe it, but like it's just hard to wrap my head around that was your setup for the sequel and the sequel's somehow better. Really? It just comes out of nowhere and exists for no reason other than to set up a sequel, and the actual story that you're telling in this does not benefit from it in any way, shape, or form. And I don't understand why they did that, especially considering they were already shooting the sequel. If it was a matter of we need the sequel hook so that we can guarantee in the next film, that would be one thing. But they didn't. They were already making the next one, meaning that this stuff could have been done at the start of the next movie and completely detached from this and improve it notably. So that was just eye-rolling, that stuff. And again, it's frustrating because the core story and the characters at the heart of it and the emotional impact and what they go through and those journeys are really well done and compelling and heartfelt. And they're just undermined by the alpha nonsense and these freaking flipping around guys in tracksuits. Like, what the hell? What the actual hell, man? And even if the next one is great, I can't imagine I'm going to turn around on that being your ending for this movie. Like, why? Why? What are you doing? Yeah. But yeah, you can tell that the parts that bugged me about this movie really bugged me about this movie, but they don't remove the good. Like, they unfortunately counterbalance it and result in what I would ultimately say is a decent, slightly above average movie, when it honestly should be a lot more if it just stuck to its guns and didn't have these added things that drag it down. But I mean, at the very least, the bad things don't spoil the good things. I mean, it spoils the overall experience, but the bad things aren't bad in a way that they make the good parts less good. They just counteract them in the ultimate assessment. But yeah, 28 years later, anybody else see this thing? What are your thoughts on it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. They all help. Don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you just come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lafula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Oliver B, Mystic Shadow, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Pickapok, Becky Sparks, Ulrich, Twylord, Tracy Scrabbit, Pau Barabajoggle, Cindy Ella, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and thanking some random folks from my lower tiers of support. Thank you, Pippa Barwell, Mandy Walla, and Jessica, the Trans Metal Alchemist. The boys are back, and we've got a new one here. We have Navarro has joined the mischief. Okay, so that's just what we're doing now. All right.